Have you seen this man? You have, even if you don't know it. The man over my shoulder is Thomas Jacob Sanford. Once upon a time, he was a man of honor. Once upon a time, he was a Marine. Here in this picture, when he was taken as a young man, you see the best of him. He's strong, young, and handsome. He has the warrior ethos. He's here to defend people who can't defend themselves. Here, now over my shoulder, you see what he became: fat, bearded, with wild eyes, and without a code of honor. But last Sunday, we saw Sanford at his worst. Sanford crashed his truck into the Mormon church in Grand Blanc. Between the gunfire that he's responsible for, between the fires that he set, Sanford killed 4 people whose only plan that day was to worship God their way and in their community. Then the law arrived and Sanford was quickly killed in a shootout. It took less than 20 years for Sanford to go from a dedicated Marine, a decorated Marine, to a disgrace and an early grave at age 40. Last episode, I told a tale of 2 Septembers. Really, it was a tale of 2 assassins. We had Leon Solgos, who in 1901 became the killer of President William McKinley. We had Tyler Robinson, who in 2025 was the killer of Charlie Kirk. The upshot of these sorry specimens is clear. Weak men make hard times. Solgos was turned out by an ugly anarchist named Emma Goldman. Robinson was trooned out by Wang in Queer Theory. If you look at the assassins throughout American history, most of them fit that model of a Leon Solgos. Think about our first one, John Wilkes Booth, the killer of Abraham Lincoln in April 1865. Booth was an actor, and so he was soft by his very nature. This was the first theater kid assassin in American history, but he would not be the last. Howard Mudd, the doctor who treated his broken leg, noted in his report Booth's unseasonably pale complexion. America, remember, had just fought a civil war for 4 years, and yet this guy, Booth, looked like he'd never seen the sun. His shadow had never darkened a single battlefield. How could that be? All these men firing guns, and the one who makes the most consequential kill walks up to the president behind his back and shoots him in the head. Then we have Charles Guiteau, the killer of President James Garfield in 1881. This was another man full of grievance. Guiteau felt that he'd gotten Garfield elected president, and he felt that the president owed him something. He felt entitled. Entitled men make hard times. Solgos was a communist. He blamed his problems in life and his lot in life on other men. He killed our president, William McKinley, to make an ugly girl smile. Lee Harvey Oswald was weak when you look at him by appearance, but he was military trained. In a sense, he was the assassin who broke the mold. Thomas Sanford is more like an Oswald. I said last episode that it's not usually Rambo who commits these type of atrocities. School shootings, church shootings, assassinations. But this time it was. This time Rambo struck, and he did an awful lot of damage. Thomas Sanford was not just a Marine, he was a veteran of the Iraq War. He left the Marines in 2008. That means he was almost 20 years out from his final service to this country. That's such a long time that I might normally be inclined to blame some other root cause, right? There's plenty of stuff that could have happened between 2008 and 2025 that could make a man's mind go haywire. It just made me think, though, if Thomas Sanford had played in the NFL for 4 years, 20 years ago, would we be blaming CTE for his obvious mental break? Probably. And it would feel like it feels now when we blame PTSD. Like a too easy answer. It just rolls a little too fast off the tongue. It sounds just a little too convenient. But then I saw where police said that Sanford had placed IEDs, which is to say improvised explosive devices, which is to say bombs, at the church. The IED, if you remember, was a favored weapon of America's enemies during the War on Terror in both Iraq and Afghanistan. There's no other place Sanford would have got the idea to plant IEDs if not fighting the War on Terror. If I had to guess, Sanford probably lost friends. He certainly lost other Marines. He lost people he knew, loved, and served alongside with to the IED. And then 17 years later, after he leaves the Marines, he brings that kind of violence home to the home front. So Thomas Sanford helped America fight our war on terror. And then in September 2025, 24 years later, after we were attacked and what jumped off the war on terror in 9/11, Thomas Sanford is bringing the war home to his neighbors. On Monday, I was down in Grand Blanc. I was knocking on doors for the New York Post, following the trail of fear that Thomas Sanford left behind. The whole world was watching as FBI officials, state police officials, local police officials said they don't know his motive. Guys, this is where I need all of us to put on our thinking caps, whether you work in policing, whether you work in journalism, or whether you're just somebody trying to make sense of your world as you watch the news every night. Sometimes, I'd even say oftentimes, things are exactly what they look like. As the kids say today, the purpose of a system is what it does. The purpose of an action is what it does. So I think we can safely infer from 4 slain Mormons killed during a church service at a Mormon church that Thomas Sanford set out to harm and kill Mormons. Look, guys, we're not shooting an episode of Law and Order here, where the conclusion is wrapped up in a bow and everything is solved 45 minutes later. Sometimes we need to put our own thinking caps on and think things through. There's not always going to be a manifesto. Sometimes the act itself explains the intent. It's safe to say that Thomas Sanford did not intend to harm Jews or Catholics or Muslims or Protestants that day when he shot up a Mormon church. We don't need to pretend we don't get this. We don't need to ask a biologist what a woman is. And we certainly don't need a weatherman to tell which way the wind blows. When a guy shoots up a Mormon church, he was there to kill Mormons. And now I think back to Thomas Sanford, the Marine. Marines are trained and they take oaths to defend people who cannot protect themselves. How does a guy go from the warrior ethos on one hand to specifically seeking out the defenseless in less than 20 years? Sanford's little boy has an insulin condition. The family's even had to raise money very publicly for his care. But this wasn't the act of a John Q. Denzel Washington's not walking through that door. This is not a guy who used evil means to a worthy end, which is medical care for his son who was being denied it. No. For Thomas Sanford, the end was his end game. First for his victims, and then for himself. 2 good guys with guns, including an officer at the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, quickly engaged him. They were there within 30 seconds of the attack, and Sanford was killed at age 40. A disgrace to his name, his family, and the uniform he wore as a Marine. So we can infer from what happened the motive. The motive was obviously to kill Mormons. But the question we're all left with, journalists, police, citizens, even his family and friends, is why? Why would a man throw away everything, including his family's good name, and gain nothing? I mean, Thomas Sanford put me in position of knocking on his mother's door the day after she lost her 40-year-old son. Now, I'm a journalist. I'm used to knocking on doors, often in bad news situations. It's generally not an Ed McMahon situation, right? Where you're going up there with an oversized check and great news. If I'm knocking on your door, it's because something has gone horribly wrong. And he put me in that position. And I thought about, as I briefly interacted with his mom, who wanted nothing to do with the press, and why would she? I thought about my mom. You know, we lost her 2 years ago, July 2023. And the idea of doing something that would put her face to face with reporters, that would make her face the world and explain what horrible thing you did. I couldn't imagine doing anything worse other than harming her directly. And that's the position Thomas Sanford just put his family in. And for no good reason. There was no greater good here. His son has no better medical care than he would have gotten. This was pain for the sake of pain. So, what I'm going to say next is probably going to be unpopular. It just so happens to be true. The chickens of America's war on terror come home to roost in America daily. But most times we don't care because we don't have to care. It doesn't affect us in obvious ways. Most times, and for most veterans, it's a silent struggle. Think about all the commercials you see. Think about the men you may have known who have lost hope, lost touch with reality, and then commit suicide. We don't know their pain until it's too late to do anything about it. We think of the war on terror as kind of a more humane form of war, right? Because unlike a Vietnam War, nobody was drafted after 9/11 to go fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. Every single war fighter who signed up did so of their own free will. Every Thomas Sanford who put on that hat and put on that outfit and said, I'm going to be a Marine and help people and fight bad guys and defend my country, none of them had their arm twisted to do so. No one made anyone do any of that. Since the earliest days, since people have been fighting wars in the world, war has always had this two-tier problem. That's the gap between the men who serve and fight in those wars and the men and women who stay home. I would argue that gap has never been wider than during the war on terror. So we have Group A, of which I'm a part, which is the citizen who is permitted, because nothing is asked of them, to go on about their life as if there's not a war on. And then we have Group B. We have the warriors who fight. And it occurred to me this week that Group A, again, of which I am part, almost never thinks about Group B, the warfighter. Whereas Group B is trained and told that it's their duty to risk it all for Group A, for guys like me, for people like you. It's actually a miracle that we don't have more resentment among our veteran population, and it's a testament to the warrior ethos that we do not. That whatever these men have suffered, they do suffer it in silence in most cases, and they don't choose to spread their pain and sprawl their pain. We obviously hurt when they commit suicide and they leave us prematurely, especially when something could have been done about it, but they don't usually do this. This is a deviation from the norm, and it should worry you. The parable of Thomas Sanford is the war on terror is our problem and will be our problem. All of our problem. If America's fighting a war, you better damn well believe that it's your problem too. Don't look away, because one day you won't be able to. Reality will be too stark. Sunday was just one of those days. So because of the two-tier system we have, where there's this certain segregated class of war fighters and the rest of us go on as if there is no war, we're trained to not think about the costs of war or what we lost in war because we don't need to. It's not our problem. We can tell ourselves that those guys signed up for it, and whatever hell now inhabits their minds is their problem. And that sounds great. And it's how most of us live our lives most days until it becomes our problem. We hear that the Vietnam veterans were not celebrated with parades when they returned home. Well, our war on terror veterans have the same story. They were not celebrated in any way. They're rarely acknowledged. They did what they signed up for. They got the money they earned. And now they carry the pain and the memories of what they did and what they saw and who they lost with them for a lifetime, alone. Somehow, we decided that after the most embarrassing war experience in American history, how we treated our veterans after Vietnam should actually be the new normal. I would ask today, how's that working out for us? When we went into war with Iraq, we were all warned, especially by people who wanted us to think this through and not fight. We were warned that if you break it, you buy it. And that's led to this different type of war. I mean, so you're telling me America beat the Nazis in 4 years in World War II. America fought a civil war in 4 years and lost 600,000 people. But guys in sandals in Iraq and Afghanistan fought us to a draw in 20 years? The only reason it looks that way is because we were fighting both those wars halfway. And so that should be a lesson to us. We should never commit to a war unless we're willing to wage total war. If you're not willing to drop an atomic bomb, then we can talk our way around the war. We can negotiate our way around the war. We can commit maybe some small group, but ain't no way in hell we're committing to a war if we're not willing to drop an atomic bomb. Maybe that'll make us more hesitant to fight wars in the future, as well it should. So the idea that we owed something to Iraq, that if we broke it, we had to buy it, is why we only fought the war halfway rather than flatten the land. We were made to think we were doing these people a favor and had to leave their country in some type of presentable condition. So no, we didn't break Iraq, but we did buy it. And then we asked men like Thomas Sanford to secure it. We didn't break Iraq, but we did break our war fighters. And now we need to spend whatever it takes and do whatever it takes to put their minds and their lives back together again. I hope our lesson from this is that there are no American wars that don't matter. There are no American wars that are not really our problem. To think so is a fiction, and on Sunday that illusion was shattered, as our governor said, by bullets and broken glass. So keep a Thomas Sanford in mind the next time America's asked to go to war, and the next time we're told it'll cost us nothing just because there's no draft. The reality is, war is hell. War comes at a great human cost. 20 years later, we're still paying off the psychic debt and the physical debt and the mental debt, not to mention the financial debt of the war on terror. The parable of Thomas Sanford is there is no us and them when it comes to fighting wars because they come from us. God willing, they will return to us. But what condition will they be in when they return? What will they have learned? Maybe about IEDs and how to create them. What will they be capable of? And what's going to happen to that warrior ethos? If America doesn't get better at protecting our protectors, we'll continue ignoring veteran suicides. Not my problem. I didn't sign up for the war. That's that guy's thing to deal with. And we'll only see the problem when the blood reaches us in our homes, offices, and churches. So you might be done with the war on terror. Maybe you never cared. Maybe you never had to because you were never asked to. But the parable of Thomas Sanford is the war on terror is not done with us.